So this is our presentation of the 3M case competition. The primary objective of where we went with our research and our efforts was to combine what 3M is capable of and what the end consumer smartphone preferences are, and trying to identify where's that overlap and what 3M can do to influence those consumer preferences. So, wanted to describe the survey that we designed. We took the attribute pool that the 3M case provided, and we began to research all these attributes, both those that 3M could influence and those that consumers preferred but 3M couldn't necessarily influence. And we began to sort out what was most important in our opinion through the research. In this next slide, you'll see the attributes we decided upon. There were 8 of them, and that was a lot for usage in the survey and keeping it simple. You can see some of the research we've done here, and also included in the appendix some of those, the backup for how we determined what those attributes were that we used in the survey. And then once we had the survey attributes nailed down, we determined levels for each of these attributes. We took what the current market offerings were and tried to add a little bit beyond that and a little below that. And then once the survey was nailed down, we deployed the survey. We again used Sawtooth software and sent it out to family, friends, and other MBA students. We gave it a week, starting February 5th, ending February 12th. We were very pleased with the response. We had 176 qualified respondents, and as you can see, there was an even distribution among gender, income distribution across the United States geographically, and then you can see the age distribution as well.
Some of the overall insights that we found was that the most important thing to the end users is the price. However, they really do care about screen brightness and battery life, both of which 3M can affect. The also interesting what we found was that they preferred the ideal screen size was between 5 and 6 inches, and that the ideal depth and thickness of the phone was actually 6 millimeters, so in the middle of what levels we had laid out.
Now for the major portion of the, or purpose of the survey was to develop some consumer segments based on our research, and you can see here how that's segmented out and that it is a pretty even representation of the market. First of all, Negative Nancy, she's one that uses her smartphone pretty heavily, but is most dissatisfied with the many features that her current phone has. But when it comes down to it, if she could change one thing about the phone, it would be to improve the battery life. So based on this, our recommendation is that 3M should continue to place a major emphasis on developing capabilities to lengthen the battery life to appeal to this segment of the market. And even though this will heavily affect the Negative Nancy consumer, it will also affect the other segments of the market as well.
So this is Fancy Frank. Frank cares about having the latest and greatest tech. He's typically middle-aged and has relatively high disposable income compared to the other segments. Because of that, because he demands the latest stuff, he's willing to pay for it also. Even if he doesn't always use it, he wants to know that it's there. So based on the insights that we gathered from Frank, we've got some specific metrics, but most importantly, he wants high screen brightness and high screen resolution, so that he can show that off. And again, the key with this segment, and also the largest of the 4 segments, is that he's willing to pay the premium price for premium features.
The next segment is Satisfied Susan. She's the type of person who is relatively young and has a slightly lower income than the average of the population, but she is willing to spend more for her phone because she knows what she wants. And because of that, she's also satisfied with the features of the phone. And she wants to maintain that quality. So some of the things we found is that durability is very important to this consumer group, and also brand. They're looking for something that has those quality features, and they're willing to pay for that. So the recommendations for this group are a little different, because what's important to Susan aren't things that 3M can directly influence, but the value add is that 3M can maintain a better relationship with their retailers, with the wholesalers or the sellers of the phone and help them understand what Susan cares about, and so they can be able to better emphasize that to Susan and give her the things that she's looking for.
And the last profile we found is for Cheap Chuck. He tends to have a much lower income than the majority of the population, and so although he realizes he doesn't have the latest and greatest in features, it's worth it to him to pay the lower price, and that's really all he cares about. However, through insights we found that if anything did matter to him, he'd like to improve the battery life and the brightness of the screen. Since 3M we found they shouldn't be really focusing on Cheap Chuck because they are in the end all about that bargain price. So we recommend they don't really focus on them, but that they when they're talking to their customers, that they understand that this is a segment.
So in addition to our conjoint survey, we also did some secondary research to answer the secondary objectives that are found in the case. And want to focus on the major findings that we discovered. First of all, we found that younger consumers are much more likely than any other age group to do research on the phones that they're going to purchase. And so our recommendation based on this is that more marketing should be dedicated to highlighting those more technical aspects of the cell phones rather than on the obviously visual cell phone features such as device cameras. This could also be separated out into TV ads versus YouTube and social media to appeal to both the technical research, people that do the research on technical capabilities versus the casual users. And this is a graph that just shows that research that we found. Another major insight that we found was that the frequency of replacement for most people is pretty consistently 2 years, and this is consistent with our survey findings, and this is mainly because of the 2-year plans that most people are on. The usage behavior insight that we found here based on this chart is that both security features and battery life have a lot of opportunity to be increased in terms of satisfaction levels for consumers. And so 3M can potentially focus their efforts on these things to increase that satisfaction if possible.
So lately there's been a lot of attention to new technology being implemented into cell phones, like retinal and fingerprint scanners. They're just not being adopted. Nobody cares so far. So the most important things, you can see the activities here that people are using their phones for. 81% of current phone usage benefits from improved screen performance, and 100% benefit from improved battery performance. And both of these are things that 3M can influence.
Also, half of cell phone users reported a desire to have more hardware customization options, which potentially could be an opportunity for 3M. And 68% of cell phone users agree that new phones have more technical power than they will actually use. So this could potentially lead to cost savings. Also, we found that there is a segment of the market who have young children who would like to be able to have separate profiles on their devices to protect their content versus what their children are using.
So in conclusion, using the survey we conducted through Sawtooth and the secondary research through a lot of consumer insights, these are our overall recommendations. First, from an overall perspective, a focus on battery life and brightness. And as we mentioned earlier, we know what the ideal thickness and screen sizes would be. And all these consumers, regardless of the segment, they would love the price to be cheaper, and so any ways to cut out costs would also be beneficial. As far as recommendations from the segments themselves, a focus on Fancy Frank, because they're willing to pay more, there's a bigger opportunity there for 3M to capitalize on. But Negative Nancy, because they're such heavy users, extending the battery life. Fancy Frank, willing to pay a lot, so increase the brightness and resolution capabilities. Satisfied Susan, just knowing that no matter what, Susan's going to find what she's satisfied with, so just use those insights to strengthen relationships in the value chain for 3M. And then Cheap Chuck, any cost we can save and pass on to the value through the value chain and lower the price for the end consumer, that's the best for Cheap Chuck. And then from our secondary research, again, offer hardware customization. That's a big trend as of recently. And then just not overcomplicating it, focus on innovating our core features and offering more basic models. So that's our presentation.